Hello, everyone. It's Charlene Lee, and today I'm going to be talking about how artificial intelligence can be wise. And I titled this live stream as a question because it's a question. There's a philosophical question: is can we actually have artificial wisdom? We have artificial intelligence. It's getting very, very good, but can we actually count on it, trust it to be making wise decisions and taking wise actions as well? So that's what I want to explore today. Can AI be wise? And I'm interested in this topic because, in addition to being very curious and excited about generative AI, this latest generation of AI, I'm also been working on another project looking at wisdom, and in particular, how we can be wiser as leaders, make better decisions, and also create organizations that can also be wise. And I thought this week I would explore the combination of these two topics together because we really want our AIs to be wise, to trust that they can make good decisions, and that it has some ethics built into it. So I would love for you to just chime in, share where you're coming from. I would love to welcome you, and then share your definition of wisdom. What does wisdom mean to you? What does it look like? How do you recognize it? And then also thinking about how do we apply this to this world of artificial intelligence. So let's get into it. So, first of all, I do believe that wisdom requires knowledge and intelligence. And that's what we gather, that's what we learn in school. But just because you have knowledge and intelligence doesn't mean that you're wise. We've all met these people who we call book smart, right? But they're not very life smart. They don't make good decisions, they can't put two and two together, and they just continuously are not sitting in wisdom. Whereas we meet somebody and we go, wow, that person seems to be really wise. What is it that they do? How do they think about things? What is the lived experience they have? And we also run into sometimes very young people early in their experience, early in their careers, or early in their lives, and they just feel wise. They feel like an old soul. It feels like there's this course of experience and wisdom that comes pouring out of them that's unexpected. So this got me to be thinking, what's the difference between intelligence and knowledge and wisdom? And in the end, I do define wisdom as the ability to use knowledge and intelligence and especially experience to make good decisions. And I want to put one other caveat on that is that wisdom is knowing the difference between right and wrong and then using that knowledge to make good decisions. And that's what makes you wise. So the question becomes, can we actually train our artificial intelligence tools to be wise? Because increasingly, especially as we're depending on them to make decisions, especially with the rise of autonomous agents, we're trusting them to make good decisions. And this is the key thing is decisions are based on an objective of what you're trying to accomplish, a goal. And as an artificial intelligence, you're building into the programming to achieve that goal and to define what does good look like when that goal is there. And one of the key objectives around being wise is that you have and take into account the well-being of yourself as an entity, as a person, and also the well-being of others. And when we can build that into the intelligence, into our wisdom, into the wisdom of our AI, then we can begin to trust it more that it is going to make good decisions. And this is the issue about ethical AI too as well. How do we define what good looks like? What does well-being what does it mean? How do you define it? For example, how do you define happiness? How do you define flourishing? How do you find good life or meaning? And so that's what I want to talk a little bit about today. So I just want to say hello to Lamin. Thank you for joining. John Ocheja, Cynthia coming in from Jacksonville, and Abhishika from Bangalore. So Anand from Bangalore. So great to have all you. Very international audience. Thank you so much for joining this. And just getting into what does it mean to be wise. And Cynthia's chiming in saying, maybe it's arriving at caring decisions in that you understand who this person is, understand their lived experience, their context of where they are, and then makes a decision that takes care to make sure that that person's well-being is taken into account. So that's a great understanding. And if you think about artificial intelligence, if you're just putting a prompt into ChatGPT, it doesn't know who you are, doesn't understand that context. Versus if you're talking to, for example, a health provider who has a relationship with you, understands the context, understands your mental state, and can make a better decision for you. But eventually, you can think of also if you have an ongoing conversation, so to speak, with an artificial intelligence that is being used by a healthcare provider, you can also start developing a wisdom that that healthcare provider may not be able to contain inside of their heads because they're seeing so many patients for just on average 8 minutes at a time. Can you really develop that understanding? Whereas using the AI to provide some of that background, that knowledge, but also that wisdom to say, well, this is what the circumstance is now, new information. This is how we can provide the most care for this individual. Let's see, we have a couple other people. We have Jason coming in from Richmond, Marissa from Tennessee, and Sanji from Guwahati. So thank you so much for joining, everyone. I just want to go through and just talk a little bit about some of the biggest issues about developing this wisdom. And this is again coming from some of my research on what it means to be a wise leader, to make decisions in a highly complex world today. And it's some of the requirements are being able to have knowledge and experiences that you can apply to new situations. So therefore, the ability to learn. It's as a person, as humans, we get very emotional about things. So it's also being able to have the emotional intelligence to understand when you're getting triggered or if there are biases, to be able to set those aside so that you can see the reality of the situation. And it's also being able to pull in lots of different perspectives, that you have the wisdom to know that you don't have all of the answers and that you only have one perspective. So it's bringing in, acknowledging that there are all these different other perspectives that could be valid. And I think it's extremely interesting how AI can take into account all of these different perspectives, many, many different perspectives all at once. And then the very important part, the last part of wisdom, the requirement, is being able to trade off all of those different competing and conflicting ideas to make a judgment, to be wise in that moment, to understand, well, I can trade off this and that, the well being of one group versus another, and be able to make a decision. So, this is the hardest part because we can build in algorithms and patterns and decision making process into our AI. And especially now with some of these generative AI tools with transformer technology, we're able to really train it at a broad level rather than a specific level to follow certain rules, to understand and have judgment and exercise wisdom about what is right and what is wrong. Now, this can be really interesting and challenging and terrifying for us as humans to accept that our artificial intelligence tools can be wise, but we're getting there. And I'll talk a little bit about what this means because I do believe that wisdom is very much in context. And I just want to throw up this question from Jay, really exactly right on point. Great timing for this. Does wisdom have context, a geography? And this is one of the biggest problems that researchers and programmers of artificial intelligence are running into. How do you define good? How do you define the fact that what well-being means in one context for one group of people or a community or society looks very different than what good looks like over here. So that context, I think, is the most important part of this. And the one thing that I see oftentimes missing in the dialogue around wisdom is that this understanding of the context of the person, of the circumstance is so important because understanding that person's well being, that community's definition of happiness needs to be taken into account, not just an arbitrary conditioned set of what good means, what ethical means by the people who are doing the programming. So we can have these sort of top-down versions of ethics, I think of Isaac Asimov's three laws of robotics as an example. But we can also have a bottom up one that's built together based on all these experiences, all these different contexts. And I do believe that because of the capacity of artificial intelligence, we can take a broader sense of what well being looks like into account when trying to figure out all the different trade offs you have to make. So this is a very high level topic in some ways compared to some of the things that I usually talk about. But I wanted to put it out there because when we think about building these AI tools, using them, and also as consumers of these tools, asking the questions of the people and the platforms creating these tools, are you being wise? Are we building wisdom as well as intelligence into these artificial platforms that we have? All right. So a couple other hellos from people. We have Sanjal Banaji. So thanks for joining, Majid also for joining, and Mark. Good to see you, Mark. You have a great question here, Mark. Why do we expect wisdom from folks like judges and teachers, whether deserved or not? And as you mentioned, doctors. So we expect them because they are put into positions where they are being asked to use their experience, their knowledge, their intelligence to make wise decisions. Judges, in particular, you hope and cross your fingers, are exercising wisdom. Teachers, we hope, are teaching in the wisest way and sharing their knowledge and experience and being able to discern whether a child needs a bit more time, a different approach versus another child. And so this is where we're counting on people to exercise wisdom in these places. Again, deserved or not deserved. And this goes back to my core question and my research around wisdom. How can we be better at developing and nurturing wisdom in ourselves and our leaders and our organizations and our communities? I have this dream that we would actually, instead of trying to impart knowledge in our schools, we're trying to also foster wisdom in our children from an early age. So they apply that knowledge to life and become wise people, again, as an objective of what schools try to teach. And so, in the same way, how do we encourage our artificial intelligence, these tools that are incredibly powerful? How do we make sure that we're building wisdom into these programs? And again, there is a very strong ethical aspect into this that's built into ethical AI, but it also requires that we, as the participants in this, to take the time and effort to define what does wisdom mean, what does well-being mean, and understand that there could be multiple dimensions of this. So one of the things that I just, again, this is a very simple concept and the question that I'm asking. I don't pretend to have all of the answers on this, but one of the interesting things that I do want to share is this whole idea of this hybrid approach at the top down and the bottom up. One researcher said it's basically a focus on virtues or of principles. And it's a hybrid between these two. And then this is idea of putting a framework around these neural networks, and basically to train these bots, these artificial intelligence, to distinguish between right and wrong. And the only way you can do that, we understand that wisdom is not something that you can learn in a book. You have to live it. And in many ways, the training that we have of these artificial intelligence tools, being able to train across a wide and very diverse set of not just data, but of users. And the more that we can give our artificial intelligence really big, complex, and perplexing issues and questions to grapple with, the better I believe that we'll be able to actually train it to make these kinds of decisions. I mean, right now we're at the baby steps. I'm asking AI sometimes to make trade-offs between. We see this all the time between getting to. When I'm looking at travel bots, for example, do I trade off the amount of time I have to spend versus flying, versus the cost, for example, and whether these are easy trade-offs to make based on your definition of well-being, but my definition may be very different from somebody else's. So I do believe that with wisdom, actually, it comes from being able to discern what you as an individual defines as well being, as good, as success. And that requires a level of trust and the building of a relationship over time between you using it and providing the data and information that that AI, that tool needs to be able to understand you better to make the right decisions for you. And this comes back again to wisdom is not necessarily something that can be built in to every single thing. The parameters, the design principles of wisdom can be built in, but the actual practice of wisdom exists very much in the context of each individual interaction and with each individual and an organization. So that's what I wanted to talk about today. It's a pretty straightforward concept and a question. And I think the one thing that I really ask us as actions is to be as we're using these tools, and especially as they become more and more powerful, that we take the time and to say, step back and say, how is this really invoking wisdom and putting that into these AIs? How can we do a better job of doing that? Again, as the builders of these on these platforms, but also as the users, because the ways that we give feedback, the way that we start training these chatbots, these artificial intelligence tools to understand us and develop wisdom and understanding about our specific issues and our needs, the better off we're going to be. All right. So Jay asked another great question. I wonder if, as we become more specialized and knowledge based, are we normalizing wisdom? I'm not sure I completely understand this, but I think the idea, Jay, that you're asking is that as we go into these niche areas of being very, very smart and intelligent and knowledgeable about certain areas, are we making wisdom as a given? Are we to the point where wisdom is just an understanding we assume that's being built in? And this is why I want us to be very aware that wisdom isn't a necessary given. You can have knowledge and intelligence and all these incredible tools, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're wise. And we have to be really careful because we see a lot of these tools making up stuff. They're hallucinating. The veracity of the information they're providing us is not real. And it sounds great, but it doesn't exist. I do believe that the accuracy and hallucinations and things like that will be taken care of and very soon. There are ways that the AIs, the chatbots, GPT will be able to verify itself to say, well, let me do a fact checking on this. It doesn't exist. Okay, I'm going to pull it out. And so I do believe that these kinds of things will be taken care of eventually because it'll use a transformer technology to be able to create all the information. But then before actually delivering it to you in real time, it'll check and then deliver you something much more clean. Again, it's still kind of slow in terms of its writing. And it's, again, putting words together that make sense, that sound good, but may not necessarily be true. But again, it's getting better literally day by day. And we'll get to the point where we actually see that being not a problem. So, but I do believe that as we develop these AI tools to just be really good at providing the answers, will we just assume that it's right, that it's wise, that it's making good decisions on our part? And again, that second judgment, the wisdom that we need to have in ourselves to be able to identify whether AI is being wise is a new skill and tool that we're going to have to develop. It's in similar ways, one of the best ways I believe that we're going to be able to protect ourselves against the onslaught of disinformation that's going to come on. We talk about media literacy. It really is about having the intelligence and the wisdom to make judgments about whether a piece of media, of data, is real. How do we understand? What are the markers of whether we can trust it or not? And in a world of disinformation, where things are designed to appear wise, to be right, designed to appeal to our emotions, we're going to have to develop the wisdom to be able to understand what's truly real and not to have that discernment to understand and use our knowledge and apply it to making good decisions. So that's what I have for today. I do want to share a little bit about what I'm doing next week. I'm going to be talking about how to do good postmortems. And part of this is, again, in that realm of wisdom. One of the most important parts of developing wisdom is to have moments of reflection. And I do believe that postmortems in our organizations is one of the best ways that we develop wisdom in our organizations. And therefore, I wanted to talk about how to run and have really good postmortems. First of all, you have to do them for projects, teams, but also for yourself. And then two, you have to know what to do with what you come out of them. So we'll talk about that next week. It's something that I'm trying to do on a more consistent basis. I don't do it nearly enough, but hopefully, first of all, this live stream will make me be more conscious about that, and hopefully, we can find some good ways and have some good practices also that you can incorporate into your daily life. All right, thank you again for joining this live stream about Can AI Be Wise? And I'll see you next week. Thanks.